The value of real-time data is not always obvious. I'll try and demonstrate that here, this example. It's coming from a book called Thinking in Systems by Dana Meadows. What she's talking about here is a situation where there's a permanent 10% increase in a car dealership's demand or the consumer demand served by that specific car dealership. This car dealership maintains a certain level of cars, and their logic is that we need to have at least 10 days of supply. Fair enough. But then, because of some circumstances, there is now a 10% increase beginning, say, the 25th day in this chart. Now, should be straightforward to serve, but what begins to happen, and this is what we'll look at more in more detail here, the inventory response as to how do you replenish the inventory, that begins to fall behind. The reasons are fascinating, and we'll get to those in a second here, but you'll begin to see a certain trend line where the actual availability on the lot begins to massively vary, and it just keeps getting worse. You can see here there is sometimes, quantities which are going beyond sort of or below the minimum mandated, and also in some cases going way above what was mandated. And this is interesting because obviously, the people who are making these decisions, they don't want this to happen, but it ends up happening. Why? I think this system should give us an insight into that. So what's going on here is the manager of this dealership, let's just call her Lydia, is making decisions based on what's going on in her environment. She's looking at, so perceiving sales, and perception essentially here means that she's looking at what rate vehicles are being sold. And on a Monday, and then on a Tuesday, and through until, let's say, until Friday of that week, she's looking at numbers to say, looks like there is an upward trend. And based on that, I am going to place an order to the factory that I'm seeing an uptick. And she is perceiving, and based on that, she's placing orders to the factory. And when she's placing orders to the factory, she's still hesitant because she's responsible for the business overall. So Lydia thinks that, okay, I mean, I can see there's a certain increase, but when I'm placing these orders, I better be careful, and I'm going to split these orders across 3 days. So let's say she was going to do a 10% increase in her orders, her regular order size to the dealership. She's going to do 3.3% on day 1, 3.3% on day 2, and the remaining on day 3, because she's trying to sort of minimize that risk, that what if what she's perceiving is a temporary blip, right? Could very well happen, right? It's not unknown to happen. Things might be temporary. So her perception, her math and averaging of sales data is great, but at the same time, she's using her own judgment to say, okay, you know what? I mean, I still don't want to be aggressive about it. I want to dampen this this flow, right? And essentially, what she's trying to do is that the inventory they need at the lot, that needs to be at a certain level. That number is predetermined. They have a 200-day number that we saw previously. So deliveries will come in, sales will happen, and this loop is how things sort of remain healthy, right? Now, one last element to think of here, right? So far, what we talked about is all Lydia observing things and taking action. There is a certain delay in her perception, delay in the sense that she's going to spend at least 5 days, or typically 5 days, looking at what's going on, and based on that, place orders. She's going to base her decision then and slice that based on her comfort level, to not overdo, to not be overly or underly projecting what she needs from the factories. These are delays, but these are delays on Lydia's end. Delay 1, delay 2. There's a third delay, right, which is from the factory. So outside of her control. This is a new dimension. How long until a factory actually processes the order and says, yes, we are ready, we got your order. They might want to give Lydia a quick call, verify that, yeah, are we seeing the right numbers, and so on. And then they bring in the goods, right? So there's a lot going on here. And this is why the 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 oscillations begin to show up, and how that happens is also very, very interesting here. And Dana Meadows does an incredible job explaining the different scenarios via which we can see how these problems begin to show up and what to do about that. So in real life, you have a situation where the orders begin to fall off sync a little bit. So as the demand increases, the inventory on the lot begins to reduce. And Dana makes, once Lydia makes that observation, she starts to place more orders, but then the 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 way she's doing her assessment, it begins to fall behind, and you then see a situation where the deliveries coming in, which will always be also sort of off phase here a little bit, as you can imagine, right? The deliveries are going to be always delayed. So this journey keeps getting more and more complex. And by the time she sees what she needs, there's more on the way, but she doesn't need it. So she ends up reducing the number of orders she's placing per day. And these oscillation begins to get even more and more crazy. Now, as she's dealing with all this, right, she's also learning, right? This is a human in the loop who's thinking about what can I do about it, right? And I don't want this to be a problem where I'm either overly bringing in vehicles, or I'm underserving my customers and my market. And just going back to what's in her control is her perception, right? The amount of time she takes to react. So what if, Lydia asks herself, what if I change my perception time? This is the thing in my control. The delivery delay, that's not in my control. And what that delivery delay is this gap, right? The sort of off phase I was showing you here. Apologies for the many colors here, but this gap, right? This off phasing is the result of the delivery delay, right? However, in her mind, the thing that she controls is how long does she take to make a decision. So she chooses to shorten that reaction time to say, yeah, I know I'm the problem. And she goes in that direction, and with that decision, she shortens her reaction time. And as you can see here, things get even more crazy, right? We are talking now really bad number of levels, right? You have 100 minimum, you're breaching 100 at a minimum here, right? Compared to 200 that you need. In this case, you're going 2x, right? It gets even more crazy. So the thing to perhaps realize here is that there is leverage available from this decision of acting faster. But the problem is that if you're acting too fast, you're essentially pulling the lever in the wrong direction. And if you do the math, what you'll notice is that if Dana, with everything else remaining the same, were to change and pick 6 days as her response time, the system will dampen itself and it'll look much more smoother. And this, as you can see here, right, it's not very different from the original 10% increase I originally began with here, right? This guy. So all of this is pointing to something. This is pointing to the visibility of data. Lydia here is working with exactly what she knows, what she can see, what she can control, right? She's not obviously wanting to do anything which hurts the business. She's watching the numbers, making some decisions. But where she struggles, where she fails, is to have A, full visibility, and second, and that's something which will become evident based on this iceberg model, some of the assumptions that she's working with are limited to her scope, limited to what she can see, what she can control. So she's assuming that I have to watch at least a 5-day trend line, and I'm responsible enough to not immediately react to that. I'm going to taper my ordering tempo and things along those lines. And what we mostly see in the system is events, the final outcome of something, a certain number, a certain KPI. That's what we are observing. But what we fail to, I guess, notice is where is the leverage sitting. And as I was showing you that example, the assumptions and the way to operate in a business, that's the item with the highest leverage. So if you move that in the wrong direction, or one direction versus the other, the kind of events you'll see, the kind of outputs you will see will change. And this diagram should, or this chart should should tell you why, right? You have these mental models resulting in a certain system structure, which creates certain patterns. And we saw those zigzagging oscillations, right? Which eventually create some outcomes which might confuse you, right? But now you probably have a better sense of what that means. So what can the OEM do or the dealership management do to help out Lydia? Now, Lydia's problem is not unique to her world. This is a situation you can imagine when we were in the, peak of COVID days. Vaccine deliveries was a factor, medical supplies, medical equipment, everything was behind, and we were confused as to, hey, we can all see the trend is upwards. Why are we not doing enough, etc. So back to Lydia's situation, and we can probably best relate with what I'm going to show next because of the explanation I gave you. One of the ways that you can imagine being more empowered can come from a system or an engine which is more predictive, right? Something which can help Dana make decisions. And that's not just based on somewhere that she does math, right? And that includes in her own mind, perhaps. But what's going on here is that we're saying a predictive engine can make those or help Dana make those decisions. And what that means is that she can now get insights like order now. And these are not insights that she has to then action manually. From a systems perspective, this order now should be something that reaches out to the OEM to take action, right? And before the OEM takes action, they want to be sure that, hey, the money is in the account of the dealership, right? It's not based on people's word. It's based on actual system track data on which car is sold and available, based on which information becomes available to, or rather into, a system which is an event mesh. An event mesh is, in this case, as I'm positioning it, you can imagine this as a real-time nervous system where all this information is becoming concurrently available and helps other systems pace themselves, make decisions, etc. So much so that I'm going to zoom into this one here. You can see that if there's an option to dial into a market data system that's capturing, okay, which color of the vehicle is selling high these days. And these are real things. You have situations where a certain sports team is doing too well in a certain city, and I don't know, Detroit Red Wings. Suddenly you see inclination for people to be thinking about red vehicles, checking inventory on those. And that means a certain demand spike might happen, which of course means that you need to prepare yourself for that new reality. Now, if Lydia were to be thinking about all this stuff on her own, she would be limited by that knowledge. But here we have the ability, thanks to Event Mesh, which can talk to a variety of systems, right? Learn and send information back to say, okay, here's what things look like. Here's where we need to, spend more time, energy, or to be on the sort of negative side of the argument here. If we see, blue is in high demand, but blue isn't in stock, so it might mean that you might want to reduce, as a dealership, local advertising budgets, or at least not carry ads which have vehicles in that color, right? So you don't trigger a need, a craving for that specific color in the market, right? So somewhere in here, and the arrows might be not perfect here, bear with me, is this ability now to make some decisions, right? You have a decision center somewhere in your environment where you can take better decisions. All in all, just coming back to the big picture here, right? You have ways of thinking about the world, and that should result into systems, right? So your system architecture is a result of the mental models. And as we were seeing here, right, are we gonna let Lydia make all the decisions based on what she knows, what she thinks, how much she's engaged and dialed into the business every single week of the year? Or are we going to allow systems to come in and help her and augment her? And in this case, for example, we're talking about market data coming from competition, from auctions happening locally. How many subscriptions are we seeing on, or I should say, how many purchases are we seeing on specific colors, and so on and so forth. So as you expand that horizon, as you expand the visibility and access to systems there, you are able to plug into systems as wide as the factory itself, from where systems are being from where vehicles are being dispatched. So you have this ability now. You have the ability to tie into customer intent. Whose birthday is coming up, and every 3 birthdays you see Bob coming in and inquire about new vehicles. How is that signal going to be relevant here? And you're able to bring all of this together to make Lydia's job easy and not find themselves, or not have the dealership find themselves in a position as crazy as what we saw here. So I hope this makes sense, and you can now see how real-time data can make a big difference in the way businesses are run, and genuine real-time dollar impact on not just overstocking or understocking, but the reality is you'll be serving your customers much better only because you have a real-time nervous system which can bring all the pieces of knowledge together and effectively service customers based on the idea that you learned here in the iceberg model. So this is, again, thanks to all the work from Dana Meadows in her work, Thinking in Systems. The phenomenal read opens up your mind to uh, the way systems need to interact to create effective results, and also expose a lot of risks that you can then use technology to support you with and help you out with. Thank you.